Serbian colony.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
JFK supported Palestinian refugee rights, opposed Israel's nuclear weapons program and expansionist war plans, and tried to force AIPAC to register as a foreign agent. From the moment he took office in January 1961,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God.
JFK made it crystal clear that nuclear weapon non-proliferation was a pillar of his presidency as part of his quest for global disarmament, the abolition of nuclear weapons and all weapons of war, and ending the capacity of all nations to wage war. His Zionist vice president, Lyndon Johnson, who was primarily loyal to Israel, did not share JFK's values.
I have already taken steps to coordinate and expand our disarmament effort and to make arms control a central goal of our national policy under my direction. The deadly arms race and the huge resources it absorbs have too long overshadowed all else we must do. We must prevent that arms racing from spreading to new nations, to new nuclear powers.
Not only was LBJ opposed to every aspect of JFK's peace and disarmament policies, Johnson in the 1940s had illegally shipped weapons in boxes marked Texas grapefruit to Zionist terrorist militias who ethnically cleansed the Palestinians in the 1948 Nakba. Neither JFK nor his brother and confidant, Robert Kennedy, wanted LBJ in the White House, as revealed by JFK's widow, Jackie Kennedy.
It was only months after her husband's assassination when a 34-year-old widow sat down to record more than 8 hours of recollections about her husband and his most private thoughts, while they were still fresh. JFK and his brother Bobby on Lyndon Johnson, the new president.
Bobby told me this later, and I know Jack said it to me sometimes. He said, "Oh God, can you ever imagine what would happen to the country if Lyndon was president?" So many times he'd say it if there was ever a problem.
Lyndon Johnson was a pathological liar, as reported by Bobby Kennedy, who said, "LBJ lies all the time. I'm telling you, he just lies continually about everything. He lies even when he doesn't have to lie." Speaking of lies, by May of 1963, JFK was furious at Israel for lying to him constantly about their nuclear weapons program. Kennedy delivered a near ultimatum to Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion: allow meaningful American inspections of Israel's reactor in Dimona to prove it wasn't being used for nuclear weapons, or Israel would risk losing all American and Western support. Also, Ben-Gurion established his ambition to, quote, abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine, end quote, as far back as 1937. When Israel attempted to conquer the Gaza Strip and the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula, seize the Suez Canal, and overthrow Egypt's President Nasser, with help from Britain and France, in the 1956-57 Suez Crisis, President Eisenhower kicked Israel out of Egypt using boycotts, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. Lyndon Johnson, the leader of the Senate in 1957, strongly opposed Eisenhower's sanctions against Israel, but President Eisenhower overruled him and told Israel to pound sand and withdraw. JFK, who was also a senator in 1957, did not rush to Israel's defense or attempt to undermine Eisenhower's sanctions against Israel the way LBJ had.
Thousands of Israelis demonstrate in Jerusalem against withdrawal from Gaza and Aqaba. Mr. Ben-Gurion, the premier, enters to announce the government's decision to the Knesset, Israel's parliament.
Nearly the entire world applauded the Eisenhower administration for compelling the Israeli aggressor to back off. The American ambassador in Egypt said, "The U.S. has suddenly emerged as a real champion of right." Eisenhower's handling of the crisis was a high point of his presidency. It upheld the authority and moral stance of the United Nations and the ideals of the United States. Israel learned an important lesson from this humiliating retreat. The only way Israel would be able to conquer and hold on to the West Bank, Gaza, and vast tracts of Egyptian and Syrian territory in the 1960s was by placing a Zionist puppet they could control in the White House. President Kennedy had a warm and cooperative relationship with Egypt's President Nasser, whom Ben-Gurion hysterically denounced as a would-be Hitler without any factual basis.
We want to be friendly to all the world. We want to participate in the case of peace. We want to cooperate with the world to avoid war. We have to defend our territory against aggression, and we insist about gaining the rights of the Arabs of Palestine, the 1 million refugees. We are insisting and we are calling to give the Palestine refugees their rights, their territory, and their land and their homes.
Overthrowing Egypt's President Nasser was one of Israel's numerous objectives that JFK opposed. Additionally, JFK was in sync with President Nasser in putting enormous diplomatic pressure on Israel's Ben-Gurion to allow hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes or be given the option of compensation and resettlement. This would have largely reversed Ben-Gurion's Plan Dalet, which Palestinians call the Nakba, or catastrophe, in which Ben-Gurion and other Zionist terrorist leaders masterminded the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, using terrorism and the mass slaughter of civilians to expel 750,000 Palestinians from their homes and destroy 530 Palestinian villages.